Hello, everybody. I hope everybody's fine. Give us a moment.
Welcome to the Los Angeles Tribune page. Here you will find original news programming, exclusive digital events, and shows that are directly from the community. At the Los Angeles Tribune, we believe in giving a voice to the voiceless. We are proud to be the only national brand to empower everyday people to make a difference. Since 1886, our reputation has been built on truth and responsibility. Thank you for watching and making a difference.
For general inquiries, contact today. Thank you on behalf of the Los Angeles Tribune team.
And welcome back. It is Tuesday. Tuesday means it's the Dr. Natalie show. Well, every other Tuesday at least. And, at the beginning of the year, we want to get everything in. We already talked about the Chinese New Year, which we are now officially in. And then I was thinking, what else can I bring to you? Who else can I bring to you that's going to inspire you, that is going to show you how brilliant you are? Because we've talked about this as well. Well, I found the perfect person. And I must say, this is all thanks to a friend of mine by the name of Edwin Cohen. So today I welcome, without any further ado, Mr. Simon T. Bailey.
How are you? Good morning.
I am good. And just so everybody knows, Simon is not where I'm at. So he is up very early for us. Very early. And that reminds me, everybody, just type in, those of you who are here with us, type in where you're from. I'm in Germany. And Simon, you are in
Orlando, Florida.
Orlando, Florida. For some reason, I thought maybe you're up in Chicago, but that's all good.
Yes.
Simon, I'm so grateful that you're here because you have such a fascinating history and accomplished so much. And what I found most inspiring is you're always smiling. Every time I see you or when you send little videos, you're always smiling. You have this exuberant smile and energy. And of course,
Well, thank you.
You're welcome. I don't think that came easy because your youth was not an easy youth. I'm going to point out the obvious. You're in the United States, where I used to live for 25 years. And I know that sometimes the color of skin can make a difference as well in that country. My husband is also of darker skin color. So there is a lot going on. However, in spite of that, because of that, you have taken the liberty of sharing your brilliance. How did you get there? Let's jump right in. How did you get to share your brilliance?
My mentor said to me one day, you weren't born to fit in, you were born to be brilliant. And I said to him, how in the world can you say that? You're a white man. And he said, when he and his wife first got married, they adopted two young African-American babies, and they decided that they would tell them from the day they had them what they could be instead of what they couldn't be. So he said, you're stuck in your mind and your body thinking the pigmentation of your skin determines your outcome and your future. But I'm here to tell you, you're born to be brilliant.
That's awesome. And it's simple, right? But it's true.
Yes.
And here, the color of skin, but we see that with every human being, don't we? When you tell them they can't, it's true. When you tell them they can, it's true.
Yes.
So
Absolutely.
you have a mentor, and I want to ask you a little bit first about your upbringing,
Mhm.
because I always try to let people who are in the audience know that we weren't born with a silver spoon. We actually worked quite hard, usually. Overnight success, I don't think, is ever existent. So, um, if I remember correctly, you were not your first time around brilliant in the school system. And I mean that in the way the school system has very specific needs and desires. You either fit or you don't fit.
Sure.
So, in spite of not doing the best the first time around, you are here. You have degrees, summa cum laude. Before you had your mentor, how were you able to overcome the odds of, I just going to say, not fitting in school?
Well, for one thing, I had to stop beating myself up. And secondly, I had to find out what worked for me. So I had to work a lot harder than most of the students because I was in the bottom half of the class that made the top half of the class possible.
True.
So I realized I had to put in the extra effort. And then the third thing is I had some teachers that saw something in me that I didn't see in myself.
Mhm.
And as they upgraded their verbal software, when they spoke to me, because language is the software of the
Yeah.
mind, I began to believe that they believed that I would get through school.
Mm, wow. So the teachers made a difference.
Oh, absolutely. One teacher that stands out is Miss Rita Lankus, because when I went to school, I thought I was going to be a basketball player, football, track and field, and I went out for all the sports and I got cut. And academically, I failed all of the classes at that time. So my freshman year was a total disaster in high school. My parents decided to transfer me to another high school. And it was at that school where Miss Rita Lenka said to me, "Young man, I want you to write a speech and give it before the entire school." And her words have shaped what I've been doing for the last 35 plus years, all because she saw something in me that was there that I didn't see in myself. You know, it's kind of like the old saying that
Mhm.
goes, you can't see the picture when you're in the frame.
Yes. And thank you for highlighting the teacher, in this instance, a female. But I myself am a teacher by design and by upbringing. I do think, though, in general, teachers spend so much time with the young ones, with the kids. And then, of course, at university, there's a lot that they can do. And I think they're often not appreciated enough, you
Yeah,
know.
teachers unfortunately are tolerated instead of celebrated.
Yes. Yes. So true. And it doesn't mean that, it's not nice that we give them an apple once a term, but there is a lot more to it because they really work. They love what they do.
They
And
do.
and you clearly love what you do as well. So brilliance. I tend to talk about brilliance. Other people tend to talk about brilliance. You have a special way, though, of talking about brilliance, I think. Um, I don't know if it's because of your upbringing. What intrigues you so much about every one of us being brilliant?
Well, when I studied the research work of Dr. Howard Gardner, who's professor of education at Harvard, Dr. Gardner, he and his team of researchers did an interesting study over a 20 plus year period. And what they discovered is that children up until the age of 4 are operating at the genius level. The same group of children were studied in their early 20s, and only 10% were still operating at the genius, or what I call the brilliance level. And in their late 20s, early 30s, only 2% we're still operating at the genius or brilliance level. So the question becomes, where did this genius or brilliance go? It didn't go anywhere, but it became buried by a society that says, color within the line, sit down, give it back, you can't do this. And the more a person continues to hear what they can't do, where they can't go, and who they can't become, there's a neurological path that's created in the brain that causes individuals to shut down. So what happens is creativity is robbed because of conformity. So, my entire existence on the planet is to encourage people to recognize that everything you need to succeed is inside of you. And you have to be placed in an environment that invites you to be your most brilliant self. So, if you're going to show up fully happy, healthy, and whole, it's because you have discovered that brilliance, that it factor, that thing that literally just makes you come alive.
Fascinating, because we're talking about an inside job. And I think one of your books is exactly about that. It says success is an inside job. That, of course, is easier said than done. I mean, we have lots of coaches, we have lots of therapists, we have lots of mentors, speakers. They tell us, just, recognize how important you are. You're one of them, I'm one of them. How do we actually do that if the rest of the world
Wow.
tells us we can't?
Such a great question. I think it starts with a few questions. And
Mhm.
the questions I always like to start with is, what would you do if you knew you couldn't fail? Okay. Second question, what would you do if no one paid you to do it? Because so many times we try to assign, if I make this, then that's where my self worth is. But it's
Right.
not. Because if you chase money, you won't do something for long. You'll be unhappy. And then that third question really comes from the philosopher Howard Thurman. Don't ask what the world needs, ask what makes you come alive, because what the world needs are people who come alive. And so, if we were to follow up with a fourth question, and this is a mistake that I made with my children, like some parents often do, what do you want to be when you grow up? That's not the question. The question is, what problem have you been created to solve? And when you begin to understand that you can solve problems, then you're getting closer to what brilliance looks like. And you actually move beyond success, you move to significance. Because when I'm solving a problem, it's not about what I'm getting, it's about what I'm becoming.
Right there, I need to intervene. I love the explanation, and it makes perfect sense, because I also believe that we're all here for a reason, something very specific that only we can do. At the same time, I'm teaching my daughter to not use the word problem, because very often I have seen in my own life and with everybody that I've worked with, when you say problem, it's like, it's a problem. It's a problem. What do I do? Versus if you say it's a challenge. So I use the word challenge in my house instead of problem. And you pointed out how important words are. What's your thought on this?
You know what? Actually, I agree with you, because if language is the software of the mind, seeing it through the lens of a challenge allows you to really think about it as an opportunity to provide a solution. And so I really like that shift.
Okay, awesome. We agree. That was easy. That was easy. Now, do you think that you could have made it from Atlanta, Georgia, from Morehouse College, from going there to Disney and other hospitality positions, to today being a speaker, motivational mentor, highly impactful, without anyone? Do you think you could have done it by yourself?
Absolutely not. No way.
Why
we
not?
We are built as social creatures for relationships. And what we begin to understand, relationships are the currency of the past, the present, and the future. When we come into relationships, it's not about you getting what you need. It's about showing up in that moment, discovering who you can be, because a part of you is in me and a part of me is in you. So when I show up to serve you, I begin to understand you, not control you. I begin to listen to you, not just hear you. I begin to ask you and not just tell you. And what you discover in the power of relationship, there's a powerful word in Latin called educare. Educare, which is education, means to draw out. So, what is drawn out of me, my potential, my insight, but it's drawn out of me in the power of a conversation in a relationship that's shaping and forming your psyche, your emotional wherewithal, and your self perception as to who you can become.
I love that. One would think that you and I made all this up before we talked, but educare is one of my favorite words because it's so misunderstood. The history of education has changed so much
Yes.
from, Socrates saying, well, why do you think this, why do you think that, to now memorize this and do steps 1 through 5 20 times. It's fascinating how it has changed. So if it comes to drawing things out, and you said, you had a mentor who inspired you, who said, no, you can. Have you ever had mentors or coaches or teachers for that matter who did not support you?
Oh, absolutely. And I had to recognize it right away and to understand that people don't see you as you are, they see you as they are. And sometimes they speak from a limited worldview or
Mhm,
perhaps past trauma. Past pain, the need to control, the need to push you down while they step up. So
mhm,
it's really, really recognizing that sometimes you can have a 50 by 60 dream, but you're in conversation with someone that has 8 by 10 thinking. And it's so important to self assess and to be
mhm,
aware and to do an environmental scan and have situational awareness as to what am I getting as a result of this relationship, and is this a relationship that will allow me to grow or will it stifle my growth?
mhm. And again, easily said, even though on the background of heart learned experience, as novices, sometimes, whether it's in basketball or in speaking and coaching and whatever we do, as a novice, we tend to sometimes believe what the well known person tells us,
Hmm.
what they can do for us. In the coaching arena, of course, in the mentoring arena, it means, 7 figures in 2 months. Just pay me this much and you'll get it. And we all know very often that does not work this way. But as novices, we try to believe and we hang on and we may do a second course with that person, a third course.
Mhm.
What would you recommend if a novice is in this situation? Because people are always looking for mentors, everybody needs mentors. How do we actually distinguish the ones who will and the ones who don't deliver?
Wow. I think, first of all, we have to understand their origin story. And their origin story is, have they uh, dealt with all of the vicissitudes of life and how did they overcome it? Number one. Number two, there's a difference between telling you what I did and telling you what I learned, but even more importantly, understanding the context in which a person is showing up to engage a mentor or a coach. The distinction is that mentor will share their journey. The coach will begin to ask you, what does your journey look like? I'll never forget a few years ago, Tom Wininger, who has since transitioned, one of my mentors, said to me, when you come to me for advice and asking me what you should do, I can't tell you what to do because I don't know you. I have to invite you into a conversation and put a mirror in front of you for you to discover the answer that is already inside of you. That's what a coach really does. A coach begins to understand that every person that shows up, if you're going to point them to true north, they have a need, a want, a style, and an emotion. And how do you begin to recognize where that person is on the journey of life? come alongside them as a guide, inviting them into a greater reality as they begin to rewrite the script of their destiny. But that only happens in the context of conversation and dialogue, where that coach or mentor is releasing the need to be right, but being open to the serendipity that emerges in a discussion.
I so love that. And I'm sorry, it all reminds me of teaching. But it really is, isn't it? And we have a lot of guests on the show and on many other podcasts and so forth, where we talk about what is a coach, what is a mentor, why the difference. I'm very particular, for example, of using the term mentor, because everything that you just said about being alongside, sharing, hearing, listening, to me, that's mentoring. Coaching is to me very often more, this is the game plan, go. And of course, we still have the consultants in there as well. So the coach still needs to know your strengths and your weaknesses.
Sure,
Thinking
sure.
about my daughter's basketball coach, and you need to know where to put the girl, what she can and can't do. But then, it's very different. And I think too many are just sitting there. They've learned, they've got a certificate on how to coach, and now they say, okay, these are the questions, go. So what makes you different in that then?
I think what makes me different is I, first of all, start with my origin story, as I mentioned. And as I start with my origin story, you will distinctively identify if there's a connection or not.
Mhm.
I think the second thing is I talk about failure more so than success, because
Mhm.
in the dictionary, failure comes before success. I want people to fail faster. If they fail faster, they can then move through whatever they need to move through, having the understanding that if I fail, I can fail forward, as John Maxwell has taught us. I can fail up, I can fail through. So that's the second thing that I'm really, really big on. And then the third thing is what I recognize is when a person tries to sell their coaching services, that's a transaction. But when a person chooses to build a relationship, that's a connection. And the distinction between a connection and a transaction is that when you have a connection, you will do more, you will add more value, you will begin to serve that person on the journey of life because you're not looking for anything in return. Now, yes, you should be fairly compensated for what you bring to the table, but I believe in the law of reciprocity. What goes
Mhm.
around comes around. If you do right by a person, you don't have to push your services on them. You will pull them towards you because it's meant in the universe for you to work together. And that person will intuitively know that you have found your inner Neo and that you are the one for them. And if not, it's okay.
Absolutely. Yeah, I talk a lot about energies as well. So yes, whatever energy, if you send out the energy of, oh, I need a client, I need a client, I need a client, it's not gonna work, versus over delivering, of course. And yes, compensation is important because we need to pay bills. Does it always have to be an exuberant amount of money? The reason why I'm asking is this. We see a lot of coaches who make a lot of money.
Mm.
One client, X amount. And I happen to also work with two coaches. We all have mentors, and the approach is very different. It's charge less, give more, and your impact will grow. Or what are your thoughts on that kind of standard?
I totally agree with that. That's the way I operate. That's how I've built my business in the last 20 years.
Mhm.
I've reinvented 5 times. And what I've realized in each reinvention over 20 years as a solopreneur, when I chose to give more, when I went the extra step, when I didn't add anything to their bill, but I was doing the work behind the scenes off the radar screen where no one was looking, what I realized is I was expanding my competency and my capability, which directly tied to my compensation. But I didn't have to necessarily, hey, pay me more. I just needed to become a better human being that began to understand that your capacity expands when you begin to add value to yourself first, because you can't give what you don't have. You can't be who you've not become, and you cannot do what's not been done for you. So the first thing we have to do is always look ourselves in the mirror and say, are you doing the work on yourself?
Right. Awesome. 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 Hey, I don't mean to be to talking negative about coaching, but I think we have to be honest, because if we want to reconnect with our brilliance, we need the right mentors to help us with that. And I think there's so much out there right now that it's just sometimes hard to distinguish. And I get a lot of questions from people. Well, how do I know? How do I know this? How do I know this? Now, one of your other books, of course, is Releasing Leadership Brilliance. And I do want to talk about this for a moment. You have a number of books on brilliance, logically. This is leadership brilliance. And you yourself have been, of course, in leadership positions in the hospitality management industry. So let's start with leadership brilliance. How does leadership brilliance differ from regular brilliance?
Yeah. So the job of the leader is to invite people on a journey to discover the leader within themselves while they're following you. So a leader can never really inspire anyone unless they consistently are saying, how am I re inspiring myself? Because the word inspire or inspiration means to breathe life into. So leaders every single day, they look at, how am I doing in my head? How am I leading from my heart, so that my hands can align to move anything, any team, any direction, any vision forward? How this is different from brilliance is really not different, because whether you have a leadership title or not, somebody is following you somewhere. When you have the leadership title, it's understanding that leadership is caught and leadership is taught. So, what are people catching from you that causes them to find the leader within themselves to persevere through whatever is going on in life? So, a leader really understands that he or she models the belief and the behaviors of how to show up and to be the best version of themselves. One more point as it relates to leaders. One of my mentors said to me that within every brain, there is a mind. Within every mind, there is a belief system, or what Peter Senge calls in his book, The Fifth Discipline, a mental model. Within every belief system or mental model, there is a shaper. And within every shaper, there's a story. So a leader has the ability to put a mirror in front of a person to recognize their story so that they might be shaped in believing that their mindset, skill set, and will set will allow them to thrive and flourish in any economy.
And of course, on the flip side, if the leader is not able to hold up that mirror, then the employee or whoever we're talking about here might get dissatisfied. And then we're talking about business and the great resignation and the great resignation of that. Okay, fascinating, fascinating. And obviously, I couldn't agree more. And I don't want to just jump on everything that you say. When it comes to leadership, because you've had a number of leadership positions, does leadership come natural or can it be learned?
Leadership is really both. It does come natural and it can be learned. So let's just unpack this just for a moment. When I say leadership is natural, there are some people that have a natural proclivity to be assertive, to
Mhm.
advance, to move forward, to they have the initiative, they have that chutzpah to speak up, speak out, say, let's get this done. That's
Mhm.
that natural leader where they are internally motivated. The word motivated, root word motive, that motive to do what needs to be done. But then you have those leaders who are shaped through life. They're shaped by crisis. They're shaped by others, and they learn it over time. How do they learn it? They show up every single day to put one foot in front of the other. And they say to themselves, I want to try a little bit harder than I did the day before. That is leadership being developed over time instead of overnight.
I like that. Over time instead of overnight. And in leadership positions, as you pointed out, we deal with different people, different locations. Hospitality management is one thing because you sort of always have to be nice. I think
Sure.
that's a stereotype,
Yes.
Um, because otherwise you lose everybody who comes by. Every customer is going to be lost. But if then we're thinking about Walt Disney, the dream factory, everybody should have a dream. Let's make dreams a reality. When you work there, is it like that too?
You know what? Disney is a great organization, but it is not perfect. And there are days when there is not a magical moment. If I'm being really honest with you. And
Yeah.
it's really understanding when the pixie dust is not there, how do you find your spark? How do you
Mhm.
still create that magic moment, not just for the guests, because at Disney they don't call them customers, they call them guests, but
Yes.
really internally, starting with your team. How do you look at what people are doing right instead of what they're doing wrong? All of the research says that disengagement is at an all-time high. So if I'm working on a team that's disengaged, how do we find that pixie dust and that magical moment? Again, one
Mhm.
practical step is go back to day one, the first day when you started working in that place of business. What captured your heart? What captured
Mhm.
your spirit? What captured your mind? Go back to day one and let day one rejuvenate you to understand that a job stands for just overboard. So quit your job and go to work. Because when you go to work, you're working your brilliance out of you, but you're also working within you the ability to say, this is where I'm supposed to be. And it becomes more purposeful than just showing up to fill a role.
Mhm. Absolutely. And, it's not just Disney, it's every company. You have moments where everything goes right, you have moments where it doesn't.
Yes.
It's normal because we're human. And
Yeah.
like you said, when we find the pixie dust, when we find the spark, when we find the glitter, that's
Mhm.
just we just have to get it back out and say, hey, here it is. This is why I'm doing what I'm doing. You were actually, if I read it correctly, in the highest position in the sales department with Walt Disney. Is that right?
Yes, I was sales director for the Disney Institute.
Yes. Um, did you learn a lot there?
Oh my goodness, what didn't I learn? I learned so much that has shaped me in doing what I'm doing 20 years later.
Mm, yeah. I mean, I figure that there's so much to learn. There's so many different avenues. There's so many different things that are going on. It's fascinating. I do want to talk more about it, but we are about at the half point. So I want to take a teeny tiny 1 minute break. And then we'll talk more also about the spark that you just mentioned.
Okay.
Welcome to the Los Angeles Tribune page. Here you will find original news programming, exclusive digital events, and shows that are directly from the community. At the Los Angeles Tribune, we believe in giving a voice to the voiceless. We are proud to be the only national brand to empower everyday people to make a difference. Since 1886, our reputation has been built on truth and responsibility. Thank you for watching and making a difference.
For general inquiries, contact today. Thank you on behalf of the Los Angeles Tribune team.
And of course, that means we're back with Simon T. Bailey talking about brilliance. And before I jump into my questions, we do have Hi, Believe in Yourself. Nice to see you again. One of my favorites. And he has a question. And the question is, Would you say that doing anything begins with looking at your habits and ask yourself which habits support your outcome, which don't, and work to replace the unserving ones one at a time? So it was a long one. What are your thoughts on that? Look at
So,
habits,
yeah,
analyzing. Yeah.
I teach on habits a lot. I believe that habits are more important than goals. Anybody can set a goal and say the goal is the outcome. But I'll never forget, I was sitting in a session almost 25 years ago, and the facilitator said, "You don't decide the future, you decide your habits, and your habits decide the future." He
Mhm.
went on to say that the secret to success is hidden in your daily routine. So habits drive everything.
Yes. See, and I don't even call them habits, I call them patterns. you know, but it is the same. It is so crucial. And since you also, of course, teach on them, have courses about habits or patterns, I find the subconscious habits so fascinating when we're on autopilot. We don't even know what we're doing. And then it's suddenly like, whoa, this is what I'm doing. That's why I can't move forward.
Yes.
Really fascinating stuff. And believe in yourself, just say thank you for the answer.
You're welcome.
So I'll show you that. The question was a little long. I didn't want to take up the whole screen. So when it comes to habits, when it comes to patterns, refining your brilliance, you talk about refining your brilliance, and then you have in leadership, assuming you have in business, and then on everyday living. So would you say that finding your brilliance, being brilliant, is a daily task?
Yes, because it's like brushing your teeth. You brush your teeth every single day. And because of that pattern of saying, I want healthy breath, I want a healthy life, you do it and it's automatically. So brilliance is something that you constantly work on every single day. It's truly the first step in what I would call emotional and mental well-being.
Absolutely. And when I say task, obviously it's not something like a chore that I don't want to do, but we can create little patterns, little habits to make to have like constant reminders, right?
Yes.
Okay. A lot of people in that idea of constant reminders, they tend to talk about affirmations,
Mhm.
affirmations and sticky notes everywhere to remind you. What are your thoughts on those?
Well, the power of affirmations is understanding that, as Proverbs teaches us, that death and life is in the power of the tongue. So you can tell where a person is going by listening to their conversation, because their conversation says everything about their self image, their self identity, and their self esteem.
Mhm.
So when you begin to really speak words of life, you begin to move yourself forward. I can remember there was a time in my life where I committed verbal judo on myself, constantly beating myself up because, Dr. Natalie, of the story in my head. And I was bringing that story of I'm Black, I'm born in the poor city in America,
Mhm.
my options are limited, the white man is working against me, and
Yes.
on and on and on and on. And what happened, Dr. Natalie, and everyone listening, I began to spiral down.
Yes.
One of the things that's taught in caring science is understanding biocytic language versus biogenic language.
Mhm.
Biocytic, which comes from the word biocide, is that poisonous language that causes individuals to spiral down. But biogenic is this ability to spiral up by being very mindful of the language that I'm using, because language creates worlds and worlds creates outcomes.
Mhm. 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 And it is true. I'm still laughing about the verbal judo. Uh, it is true. It's like we're beating ourselves up, like smashing ourselves against the wall, and we actually create that vicious cycle. It's like, no, you're no good. No, you can't do that. No, you can't. One of the things that I always try to say is, and I'm bringing this up because you mentioned the language and,
Mhm.
how we talk to ourselves. Very often, when I drop something, I'm not sure about you, but when people in general drop something, which sometimes does happen, the first instinct that most people have is, I'm so stupid. And I always go, whoa, hold on a second. And you're nodding. What are your thoughts?
So we have to think about that. One of the research pieces that I was just studying this morning was a study back in 1961 about social learned behavior.
Yes.
So when a person says, I am stupid, where did they pick that up? What happened in their life where somebody modeled something for them that when you drop something, here's how you affirm to yourself that you are stupid. You made this mistake. And here's the even more powerful thing, Dr. Natalie, is that you begin to attract people into your life
Yes.
who will reaffirm and confirm that you are what you say you are.
Of course. Of course. It's the energy you mentioned earlier. Yes.
So we
Yeah.
have to unlearn. We have to unlearn and relearn and begin to understand I have to take control of the steering wheel of my tongue and drive into the future instead of looking through the rear view mirror of how I've been beating myself up by the words that come out of my mouth.
Yes. That is so important. And I do want to point out, I do have another question for you, but Believe in Yourself also just mentioned that he actually did change a habit. He's celebrating every victory now. And I'm pointing that out because that's so important. Every victory, big or small. So congratulations, Believe in Yourself. It's really, really important to do that. The little things, like I'm going to be celebrating after this show because my computer didn't crash and everything went well, little steps. Let's talk for a moment when it comes to the energy or what we attract with the language and with the things that we do. In business, for example, we sometimes have to amass a team, right? And you of course were a team leader, and you also had to sometimes find people for your team. When we then get team members, sometimes they're the perfect fit, sometimes they're perfect and then they're no longer perfect. And there are I'm using an example of a friend of mine. There might be situations where every single team member begins to experience high profile drama, from loved ones dying to bad car accidents to burglary, all of that stuff. And it seems to almost like be going around and around and around in the team. Um, Easy thing to do is throw the whole team out and get rid of the energy. But what else can we do?
I think whenever we have things that have impacted teams, we want to invite everybody to get centered again.
Mhm.
When I talk about getting centered, everything is in the breath. So this ability just to do the 5, 5, 5, 5 seconds, hold the breath, and then just sit in that moment. Because what we want to invite people to do is to exhale the stress and the anxiety of what they're dealing with and inhale joy and possibility for a better moment and a better moment and a better moment. And the reason we just start with the breath and getting centered is because moments, according to Dr. Daniel Kahneman, there are 19,200 daily moments. Moments create momentum, and momentum creates monumental results. The root word for momentum is moments. So when we are stressed out and things are going on and we're like, hair is on fire, wow, look at what happened. Slow down to the speed of life and
Mhm.
be in the moment. Notice I said be in the moment instead of do the moment.
Mhm.
Be. That means coming to a place of quietness where we slow down the energy and get on a better frequency so that we can vibrate energy that pulls things to us instead of repelling things away from us.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, the breath is such a powerful instrument that we have. I'm also thinking about, coherence, heart brain coherence, of course. The fascinating thing is not just that we're talking about breath, that we're talking about the energies and how it goes around. But of course, taking the action. Because if you leave that alone, then the team and possibly the business might fail. When it comes to you and your experiences, you've had a variety of them. You also had marriage. You're very open about the fact that the marriage failed, that you're still, of course, loving on your kids and trying to be the best dad that you can. What struck me, or how I really noticed you, before that you were a little bit more under my radar, was your latest book. And maybe that's just because I'm a woman. I don't know, but that was really what got my attention, because you're talking about igniting the power of women, and really that's the title. You're talking about relationship support and all of that. Can I ask you, what inspired you, first of all, to write this book?
So, Ignite the Power of Women in Your Life, a guide for men. What inspired me is because I had failed as a man. I was not honoring and listening to the women in my life. And as I was going through my divorce, my attorney, she suggested that I go and see a therapist. And no man who thinks he has it all together wants to go and sit on a sofa with a therapist named Anita, who's been practicing for 40 years, has more degrees than a thermostat. And the first words out of her mouth is, whatever you don't deal with will eventually deal with you. So that was the whack upside the head, the wake up call, the invitation to realize that I needed to do some work. So she suggested that I go and talk to my mother. I went and talked to my mother. My mother said that she had been wanting to have a conversation with me for 35 years, but I was so in my own way, caught up in ego, edging greatness out, that I couldn't hear my mother. And we had an arm's length relationship. My daughter came into my home office one day, and I sensed she wanted to talk, but I was emotionally unavailable. And she said, Daddy, I see you're busy. And I said, okay. And I said bye to her. And it hit me on the plane the next day that I missed a moment with my daughter. And when I came back off the road, I said, Madison, you wanted to talk to me? And she said, Daddy, it's okay. I said, no, it's not okay. Because if I don't change my behavior, you're going to marry a joker just like me. And what I realized, and her mother said it best, you give everybody the best of you, but you give us the rest of you. And I don't want the leftovers anymore. And what I realized, I had built a house but lost a home. I was chasing money but had no meaning. And I was pursuing status but had no satisfaction, because success was more important than significance. So, what I recognized, and I wrote this book from a deep place to come alongside men as a guide to say, you don't have to mess up the critical relationships in your life, especially with women. Let me just suggest some things for you to consider as a man, because here's what I know to be true: a man will never become who he is truly meant to be unless he begins to honor, celebrate, and recognize the power of a woman in his life, because the hand that rocks the cradle rules the world. I'm looking at all the comments here.
I want you to have that moment, because it is so powerful. When you used to sit, and I typed it in, I said, I built a house, but I lost a home. And it's so true. And not just for men, right? It's true for anybody. Always looking for the next big deal, always looking for the next glittery, glitzy object. And those people, are left somewhere there. Um, and there's no more connection. Uh, in your instance, you wrote this book for women, but you could potentially also write one, Ignite the Power of Men in Your Life, right?
Yes, absolutely.
I just want to point that out. It's not just about women and men. It really is much deeper than that. And when you want to honor the relationship with women, for example, or when you want to honor the relationship with other men, um, it all starts within you, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. And it's showing up in any context, especially when working with and connecting with the opposite sex, to understand the same letters that spell the word listen spell the word silent.
Hmm.
So when I'm truly listening to you, I'm listening between the sentences to really understand here's what you said, but is this what you meant? And so what
Hmm.
you're doing, you're moving from communication to connection. And
Hmm.
in that connecting, especially when it comes to those close relationships you have, let's say a spouse, you move to intimacy, into me see, because I'm listening to your heart, not just thinking what I want to say in my head when you stop talking. So when I move into me see, I am showing up to cherish you, not just love you, because anybody can say I love you, but to cherish you as I choose to get you and to
Hmm.
understand you because I want to become better as a result of understanding you.
Hmm. It's very powerful. Now, in a relationship,
Mm.
let's say with your estranged spouse or estranged sibling, or distant relationship with them, they don't have to be estranged, maybe it's just a little distant like you mentioned. How do you become the spark to recreate that?
Wow. You know what? So you go back to certainly day one when you first connected. What was that spark, that joy, that impetus that caused you to say, whoa, this is powerful? How did you begin to woo each other, right? I
Mhm.
think the second thing is to understand what makes that person tick, what allows that person to just smile and feel happiness all the time. And then the third thing is, what can I do that absolutely would surprise and delight you? Is it writing a letter? Is it planning a trip? Is it sending them something that they didn't even know that you knew that this was important to them? But it's finding those tender moments to be endearing and to say, I love you, not just because of who you are, but I love you for who you are becoming. And that
Mhm.
ability to see them in the future and to affirm them in the present allows that gap for them to understand, whoa, somebody gets me at a deeper level and is not just caught up in being self serving and selfish, but to be
Mhm.
selfless.
Mhm. Beautiful, beautifully said. Knowing something about the other person that they didn't even realize you knew, because it
Yes.
is the little things. Now, at the beginning of the show, we talked about pretty much about the power of words. I want to say, how you say something, how it can impact somebody, what is being said. And of course, the words "I love you," said to a mom, to a brother, to a friend, are very powerful. There is that old phrase, though, actions speak louder than words. So if you had to choose, would you choose the words or the action?
Oh my goodness, Doc, that's a setup question. The actions all day long, because love is not what it says, it's what it does. It's how it shows up. Yes, actions for sure.
Actions, yes. And I think that's often underestimated. And I love how you said, something that matters to them, because it doesn't have to be a diamond ring because it's Valentine's Day, right? Everybody gets something on Valentine's Day, but it is like maybe a little note, maybe a little something in between.
Mhm. It's the little things that make the difference.
Yeah.
And it's sending that video message just because. It's picking up that card, not because you're in trouble. It's sending flowers because you know their favorite flower. It might be stargazer lilies, but it's understanding that it's special to them. And that intentionality shows that it wasn't phoned in, but it's truly coming from a deeper place in the heart.
Mm-hmm. 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 So looking in the future, we just entered the year of the water rabbit, which I personally find fascinating. Um, Looking forward, what do you think is going to happen with the brilliance of humanity?
The brilliance of humanity, I believe the planet is going to shift towards kindness because kindness is the new gratitude. Kindness is finding a way, number one, to help someone who can do nothing for me. Kindness, number two, is if I'm in a grocery store and there's somebody behind me, pay for their groceries, not because somebody told you to do it, because it's that act of kindness. Kindness is the ability, if you're walking into a location and someone is coming behind you, hold the door for them, say good morning, good afternoon, good evening, how are you? This place of kindness is everything. For those in business, kindness is the bottom line because customers just don't want to do business with a brand that's so focused on the bottom line and doesn't care for its people because people have options now to go and work in places where they are seen, valued, and understood. So the question everyone must begin to ask themselves is how do I become an agent of kindness? Here's the research. According to Emory University, when you help someone else, the reward centers in our brain begin to light up almost as if we have been on the receiving end of the kind act that we have done to another human being. And guess what they call it? They call it the helper's high. So if I truly want to help another person, I am totally helping myself and creating healness and wholeness and well-being that no matter what people are dealing with, especially with mental health and depression and anxiety, coming from a place of kindness allows people to know that I shall live and not die.
Agent of kindness. I like that. Now, if we look around the world, we need a lot of sparks to make that happen right now. So, how do we create? I'm being very careful with my words. How do we create that army of sparks or that bag of pixie dust?
I think everyone has to start with their neighbor. And
Mhm.
I literally mean in your community, who is your next door neighbor? Who is that person that is struggling? Right now, all the research says that we have a loneliness uh, epidemic. How do we start with that neighbor who can't get out the house, who may need somebody to run errands for them? How do we begin to look beyond ourselves and say, what's within a mile radius of me that I can impact right now? Number
Mhm.
two, what would it be like to adopt a family this year that needs help? Maybe they need a job. Maybe they need to go back to school. Maybe they just need to understand and be understood, right? I think the third thing is certainly look at if I make the world a better place, what is one thing that I can do consistently? Donating to a charity that helps with food insecurity. There are so many people that don't have food. How do we become that solution? How do we show up? And here's the thing, net, and you don't need the credit. It's done quietly. It's done stealth. It's off the radar screen. This is not for front page of a magazine. It is about doing things diligently and quietly for who you become in the process and how you find a way to hug people with your words and your acts of kindness.
Yes. Yes. It is not that you're doing it to then put it on Instagram or LinkedIn or something. You don't need to take a video of what you've done.
Yes,
You do what you do when nobody's watching. That's that old saying,
that's it.
right?
That's it.
Yeah. So, last question, Simon. What's your favorite book of the ones that you wrote?
Oh my goodness. Favorite book? It's probably Shift Your Brilliance. Shift Your Brilliance because it was three rewrites, actually 10 rewrites, three title changes over a 2 year period. And Shift for me really became see how I fit tomorrow, starting to
Mm,
shift. So I had to make the shift in my head and my heart and my hands so that my feet would follow. So shift your
hmm
brilliance.
hmm Beautiful. Thank you for that. Thank you, Believe in Yourself. There were a lot more comments, so thank you for your interaction. Believe in yourself. Continue to be brilliant. Simon, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure and honor. I can't wait to talk more and maybe get another book from you. So, with that said, thank you. Have a wonderful day. Everybody, feel free to reach out to Simon, of course. He's easy to find, Simon T. Bailey. You'll find him, the spark. And then I will say, I will see everybody in 2 weeks. So thank you so much, Simon. Thank you, everybody in the audience. We will connect in 2